Helena said it with her family behind her, like a verdict already signed and sealed by a jury of pearl-wearing prosecutors. The Trenwall dining room had always felt like a courtroom to me, with its mahogany panels and oil portraits of long-gone patriarchs staring down in judgment. Tonight, it might as well have been my execution chamber. "Jace, we've made our decision," Helena announced, her voice carrying that practiced tone she used for charity board meetings. "I'm leaving you for Kellor. My family agrees it's for the best." I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, looking at the woman I'd married 5 years ago. She wore the same expression she'd worn when selecting wallpaper for the guest bathroom, clinical, detached, like she was solving a minor decorating problem rather than dismantling our marriage. Kellor Beck stood behind her chair like an oversized enforcer, all broad shoulders and self-satisfaction. The golden boy her family had handpicked from their social circle, complete with the right pedigree, the right connections, and apparently the exact brand of aggressive confidence they believed I lacked. "They want someone brutal and masculine," Helena continued, as if reading from a prepared statement. "Someone who looks right in photos and sounds right at dinners. Someone who can represent the family properly." Edmund Trenwall, Helena's father, cleared his throat from the head of the table. "Nothing personal, Jace. You're a fine accountant, but the family needs someone with more presence." Vivian Trenwall, Helena's mother, dabbed her lips with a napkin that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. "Helena deserves a man who commands respect, someone people notice when he walks into a room." I looked around the table at their expectant faces. Helena's younger brother Marcus smirked into his wine glass. Her cousin Jennifer examined her manicured nails with theatrical boredom. Even the family lawyer, Thomas Wright, sat there with his briefcase ready, probably containing divorce papers already drawn up. They all waited for me to break down, to beg, to make a scene that would validate their decision. Instead, I set down my fork and smiled. "You know what? Thank you for your honesty," I said, standing up slowly. "It takes real courage to tell someone exactly what you think of them." Helena blinked, clearly expecting a different reaction. "Jace, you're taking this very well." "Why wouldn't I? You've just saved me years of wondering why I always felt like a guest in my own marriage." I straightened my tie, the same navy blue one Helena had bought me for our anniversary. "I appreciate you making this so clear." Kellor stepped forward, his chest puffed out like a rooster in a henhouse. "Look, buddy, no hard feelings. Helena just needs a real man, you know? Someone who can handle the pressure of being a Trenwall." I nodded thoughtfully. "Absolutely. The pressure of being a Trenwall is enormous. All those board meetings, charity galas, business decisions must be exhausting to maintain such an empire." Edmund leaned back in his chair, satisfied. "Exactly. You understand why this is necessary." "Completely," I agreed. "Well, I should probably head home and start packing. Lots of paperwork to sort through, you know how it is. I always did handle the boring things." I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Oh, Helena, you might want to check your email tomorrow morning. I'll be sending some documents that need your signature. Just routine stuff, nothing important." The last thing I saw before leaving was Helena's confused frown and Kellor's satisfied grin. They had no idea what was coming. How could they? They'd never bothered to understand what I actually did for their precious family business. Outside, the October air bit at my cheeks as I walked to my car. My hands were steady as I started the engine, though inside I felt like a dam had burst. Not with grief, with something sharper, cleaner. Purpose. I'd spent 5 years being the invisible man who made their world run smoothly, the accountant who handled boring things while they took credit for success and blamed me for problems. They saw me as furniture, useful but unremarkable. Tomorrow they'd learn the difference between being ignored and being invisible. My office building looked different at 6 in the morning. Empty hallways, fluorescent lights humming their lonely tune, and the kind of silence that lets you think clearly. I'd been here since 5, spreading documents across my desk like a general planning a campaign. Maya Rodriguez knocked on my door at exactly 7:30, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd heard the news. "Boss, I'm really sorry about—" "Don't be," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Best thing that ever happened to me. Now, we have work to do." Maya had been my assistant for 3 years, the only person in this building who understood how the Trenwall financial empire actually functioned. She knew where every account was housed, every contract was filed, every signature was required. "What do you need?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. I pulled out the first stack of papers. "Remember those operating agreements we restructured last year? The ones that required my personal guarantee for the major supplier contracts?" Her eyes widened. The ones Helena's family insisted you sign because it would streamline operations? Those exact ones. Turns out when you guarantee someone else's debt, you also get certain rights, like the ability to revoke that guarantee with 72 hours' notice. Maya leaned forward. How many suppliers? 14 major ones, including Beck Construction Materials. I smiled, thinking of Kellor's family company. Amazing how much the Trenwall empire depends on credit arrangements they never bothered to read. What about the accounts? I pulled out another folder. Helena never wanted to deal with banking paperwork, said it was too complicated, so everything runs through authorization protocols I established. Protocols that require my digital signature for any transaction over $50,000. And you're going to change the authorization requirements. Effective immediately, all major transactions will require in-person verification at the bank, with identification, and documented proof of authority to act on behalf of the company. Maya whistled softly. They don't have any of that. No, they don't, because I've been handling all the boring paperwork for 5 years. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city waking up below. They wanted someone brutal and masculine? They're about to learn what brutal actually looks like. My phone buzzed with a text from Helena. Can we talk? I think we should discuss this like adults. I showed the message to Maya, who snorted. Adults? Where was adult conversation when they were planning your replacement? Exactly. I typed back, busy today, we'll talk soon. The next 3 hours were a masterpiece of bureaucratic precision. Every form filed correctly, every notice sent within legal requirements, every signature authenticated and documented. By 10:30, I'd effectively frozen the Trenwall family's access to their own money and credit. My phone started ringing at 11. First Helena, then her father, then Thomas Wright, the family lawyer. I let them all go to voicemail while I worked on Phase 2. What's next? Maya asked, clearly enjoying herself. Social media. I pulled up Kellor's Instagram account on my computer. Look at this. The screen filled with photos of Kellor at various gyms, flexing in mirrors, posing with weights. His latest post from this morning showed him in the Trenwall Mansion's driveway with the caption, New chapter, new leadership. Time to show this family what real strength looks like. Charming, Maya said dryly. Isn't it? I think the society page of the newspaper would find this fascinating, especially the photo from last week where he's flexing next to a car that belongs to the company. I scrolled through more posts, and this one where he's talking about taking over and showing everyone who's boss. Very professional. I forwarded the screenshots to Jennifer Walsh, the society columnist for the city's biggest newspaper. Jennifer had been trying to get inside information on the Trenwall family for years. Now she'd have it, along with a story about the family's choice to replace their financial manager with a social media fitness enthusiast. By noon, my phone had 17 missed calls. I finally answered when Helena called for the 4th time. Jace, what did you do? Her voice was tight with panic. I filed some paperwork, routine stuff. Why? The bank called. They're saying we can't access the operating account without additional authorization. That's strange. Did you try talking to them in person? Sometimes these things get sorted out faster face to face. I don't understand any of this financial stuff. That's why we had you. Had. Past tense. Well, you have Kellor now. I'm sure someone so brutal and masculine can handle a simple banking issue. Jace, please, can we meet? I think there's been a misunderstanding. I looked at Maya, who was grinning while typing on her laptop. She'd been monitoring the family's social media accounts, watching the panic spread in real time. I'm pretty busy today, Helena. Maybe tomorrow or the day after. I'll call you. I hung up and turned back to my computer. Phase 3 was going to be the most satisfying part of all. The Trenwall family mansion looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but everything had changed. I sat in my car across the street, watching through the tall windows as figures moved frantically from room to room. Even from this distance, I could feel the panic. My phone had been buzzing constantly since yesterday afternoon. 17 more missed calls from Helena, 12 from her father, and 6 from their lawyer. I'd listened to exactly one voicemail from Edmund Trenwall, where his usual commanding tone had cracked just enough to reveal genuine worry. Jace, we need to discuss this situation immediately. Call me back. Situation. As if my marriage ending was a minor business hiccup that could be resolved in a conference room. Maya knocked on my passenger window, holding 2 cups of coffee and a manila folder thick with documents. Morning, boss. Ready for the show? I unlocked the door and she slid into the passenger seat, immediately opening the folder. The newspaper article went live an hour ago. Jennifer Walsh really outdid herself. She handed me her tablet and I read the headline. Trenwall family's surprising choice, from finance to fitness. The article was a masterpiece of polite journalism that somehow managed to make Kellor look like a complete joke. It featured several of his Instagram photos alongside quotes about his leadership philosophy and bringing masculine energy to family business. Jennifer had even managed to get a quote from someone at his gym about his intense dedication to personal branding. "This is perfect," I said, scrolling through the article. "Professional enough that they can't claim libel, but devastating enough that every serious business contact will question their judgment." It gets better. 3 suppliers called this morning asking for clarification about their contracts. Apparently word travels fast in business circles. I started the car and pulled away from the mansion. Time for Phase 3. Let's go see how Kellor handles pressure. Beck Construction Materials occupied a sprawling facility on the industrial side of town, all concrete and steel and the kind of purposeful ugliness that said serious business happened here. Kellor's office was on the 2nd floor, behind glass windows that let him survey his domain like a king watching his subjects. I parked near the main entrance and called Maya from my cell phone. "Execute the Morrison contract clause," I told her. "Are you sure? That's the big one." Morrison Industries was Beck Construction's largest client, a relationship that accounted for 40% of their annual revenue. It was also a relationship that existed entirely because of a contract I'd negotiated 2 years ago, using Trenwall family connections to secure the deal. "I'm sure. Send the termination notice now." I walked into the Beck Construction lobby just as Maya was hitting send on the email that would end Kellor's biggest contract. The timing was important. I wanted to see his face when the news hit. The receptionist, a young woman with carefully styled hair and a professional smile, looked up as I approached. "I'm here to see Kellor Beck. Tell him Jace Arnell wants to discuss the Morrison account." She made the call, and within minutes Kellor appeared in the lobby, wearing a hard hat that looked like it had never seen actual construction work and a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Jace, good to see you, buddy. I was hoping we could talk man to man." He extended his hand for a shake, and I took it, noting the soft skin and manicured nails. Whatever brutality Helena's family saw in him, it wasn't the kind that came from actual work. "Absolutely. I wanted to personally inform you about some changes to the Morrison contract." His smile faltered slightly. "Changes?" "Well, termination, actually. The contract had a clause allowing for cancellation if the primary relationship manager, that would be me, was no longer associated with the project. Since I'm no longer part of the Trenwall organization, Morrison Industries felt it was best to explore other options." The color drained from his face. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. In fact, I think your assistant is probably getting the official notice right about now." As if on cue, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to pure rage. "You son of a—" "Careful, Kellor. We're in your place of business. Wouldn't want your employees to see their leader losing control over a simple contract discussion." He looked around the lobby, suddenly aware that several workers had stopped what they were doing to watch our conversation. His jaw worked silently for a moment before he managed to speak. "This is about Helena, isn't it? You're trying to hurt her by going after me." "This isn't about Helena at all. This is about business. You wanted to take over the Trenwall family responsibilities, right? Well, responsibility includes consequences. The Morrison contract was dependent on relationships you don't have and expertise you don't possess." I pulled a business card from my pocket and handed it to him. "Here's my contact information in case you want to discuss transitioning any other contracts that might be affected by my departure from the family organization." He stared at the card like it might explode. "How many other contracts?" "Oh, that would be telling. But I'd recommend having your legal team review everything carefully. You might be surprised what you find." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "By the way, great article in today's paper. Really captures your leadership style." Outside, I sat in my car and watched through the lobby windows as Kellor paced back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing wildly. Even from this distance, I could see the sweat stains spreading under his arms. My phone rang. Helena again. This time, I answered. "Jace, you have to stop this. You're destroying everything." "I'm not destroying anything, Helena. I'm just removing my support from organizations that no longer want it. Isn't that what you asked for?" "You know that's not what we meant." "Actually, it's exactly what you meant. You wanted someone brutal and masculine to take over. Well, now you have it. How's that working out?" There was a long pause, then, "Can we please meet? Tonight? Just the 2 of us?" I looked back at the Beck Construction building, where Kellor was still pacing frantically in the lobby. "I'll think about it," I said, and hung up. The restaurant Helena chose was expensive and quiet. The kind of place where conversations happened in whispers and the waitstaff moved like ghosts. She was already seated when I arrived, wearing the black dress she knew was my favorite and an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. The waiter appeared immediately, as if he'd been hovering nearby waiting for my arrival. I ordered coffee, black. Helena already had wine, though her glass looked untouched. "You look tired," I said, because it was true. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the circles under her eyes, and her usually perfect hair seemed slightly disheveled. "I haven't been sleeping well." She twisted her wedding ring, still wearing it, I noticed. "Jace, we need to talk about what's happening." "What's happening is that your family got exactly what they wanted. Someone brutal and masculine to handle the business. How's that going, by the way?" She flinched. "You know it's not going well." "I know that Beck Construction lost their biggest client today. I know that 3 major suppliers have suspended credit terms pending clarification of authority. I know that your family's bank accounts are frozen pending verification of signatory authority." I leaned back in my chair. "But those are just business matters. I'm sure Kellor can handle them." "He can't." The words came out in a rush. "He doesn't understand any of it. He's been calling lawyers all day, but they keep asking for documentation he doesn't have." "What kind of documentation?" "Operating agreements, signature cards, authorization protocols. All the things you always handled." She looked down at her hands. "All the boring things." The waiter returned with my coffee, and I took a sip before responding. "Well, Helena, that's the thing about boring things. They're only boring until they matter. Then they become the most important things in the world." "My father wants to meet with you tomorrow. He's prepared to offer you a very generous consulting fee to help sort this out." "How generous?" $200,000, just to help transition everything to Kellor properly. I almost laughed. $200,000 to fix what I broke in 2 days? That's flattering, but I think your father misunderstands the situation." "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot of an email I'd received that afternoon. "Morrison Industries wants to discuss a direct consulting contract with me. Apparently, they were impressed with my work on their Beck construction project and want to explore other opportunities." Her face went pale. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. They're offering me 3 times what your father just proposed, plus equity participation in future projects." I put the phone away. Turns out, being good at the boring things makes you valuable to people who understand what those things actually mean. "Jace, please. I know we hurt you, but destroying the family business won't make you feel better." "You're right. It won't make me feel better." I leaned forward. "But it's not about feeling better. It's about consequences. You and your family spent 5 years treating me like hired help, like someone who could be replaced whenever you found a better option. You never bothered to understand what I actually did because you assumed it wasn't important. We made a mistake." "No, Helena. You made a choice. A calculated decision based on what you thought was best for your family's image. The mistake was assuming that I would just disappear quietly and leave everything intact for my replacement." She reached across the table toward my hand, but I pulled it back. "What do you want? Money? A better settlement in the divorce? Just tell me what it will take." "I want you to understand something," I said quietly. "For 5 years, I held your family's world together with contracts and relationships and financial structures that took me years to build. I did it because I thought I was part of the family. But you never saw me as family. You saw me as a service provider." "That's not true." "It's completely true. And now you're learning what happens when you fire your service provider without understanding what services they actually provided." I stood up and pulled out my wallet, placing enough cash on the table to cover both our drinks. "Give your father my regards. Tell him I appreciate the consulting offer, but I've decided to go into business for myself." "Jace, wait." She stood up too, her voice carrying a note of desperation I'd never heard before. "What about us? What about our marriage?" I looked at her for a long moment, this woman I'd loved for 5 years, who'd stood in her family's dining room yesterday and announced my replacement like she was updating a staff roster. "You ended our marriage yesterday, Helena. You just didn't realize it would have consequences beyond hurt feelings." I walked out of the restaurant and into the cool evening air, leaving her standing by our table. My phone was buzzing with another call from Edmund Trenwall, but I didn't answer it. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The Trenwall family panic had reached critical mass somewhere around midnight, based on the timestamps. Helena's messages started desperate and became increasingly frantic as the night wore on. "Please call me back. Dad wants to triple the consulting offer. Kellor says he'll step aside if you come back. The bank is demanding documents we don't have. Jace, please, we need you. That last message had arrived at 3 a.m. We need you. 5 years too late. But there it was. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, looking out at the city waking up below. My apartment was small compared to the house I'd shared with Helena, but it was mine. No portraits of disapproving ancestors, no mahogany furniture that cost more than most people's cars, no constant feeling that I was a guest in someone else's world. Maya called at 7 sharp. "Boss, you need to see the news." I turned on the television just as the morning business report was starting. The anchor, a serious-looking woman with perfectly styled hair, was discussing local business news. In a surprising development, the Trenwall family organization announced yesterday that they would be transitioning their financial management to Beck Construction's Kellor Beck, replacing longtime financial advisor Jace Arnell. However, sources close to the situation suggest the transition has encountered significant complications. The screen showed file footage of the Trenwall mansion, then cut to a photo of Kellor from his Instagram account, the one where he was flexing next to a company car. Beck Construction Materials announced this morning that they have lost their largest client, Morrison Industries, citing concerns about management stability. Meanwhile, several suppliers have reportedly suspended credit arrangements with Trenwall-affiliated businesses, pending clarification of authorization protocols. I muted the television and called Maya back. "How bad is it for them?" "Bad. I've been monitoring their phone calls, legally, through the office system I still have access to. Edmund Trenwall has been on the phone with their lawyer since 6 this morning. Apparently they can't access any of the major accounts without your signature authorization." "And Kellor?" "Complete meltdown. He showed up at the Trenwall mansion at dawn, demanding that they fix the situation. Helena's been crying. Her mother is talking about calling in favors from old family friends to arrange some kind of emergency credit." I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. This was it. The moment when everything I'd built over 5 years would either save them or finish them completely. "Maya, I need you to prepare one final document." "What kind of document?" "A comprehensive transfer agreement. Every account, every contract, every relationship, every authorization protocol, everything that makes their world function, documented in detail with complete transfer instructions." "You're going to give it all back?" "I'm going to give them a choice." 2 hours later, I stood in the lobby of the Trenwall family mansion, holding a leather portfolio that contained the future of their empire. The butler, an elderly man who'd always treated me with quiet respect, looked genuinely relieved to see me. "Mr. Arnell, they're waiting in the study." The study was exactly as I remembered it, a floor-to-ceiling books that no one read, expensive furniture arranged to intimidate, and oil paintings of Trenwall ancestors who'd built the family fortune through railroad investments and steel manufacturing. Real work performed by people who understood that brutality meant making hard decisions, not flexing in mirrors. Helena sat on the leather sofa, still wearing yesterday's dress, her eyes red from crying. Edmund paced behind his desk like a caged animal, while Vivian sat rigidly in her chair, maintaining her composure through sheer force of will. Kellor stood by the window, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Jace," Edmund said, his voice carefully controlled. "Thank you for coming." I set the portfolio on his desk and opened it, revealing the document Maya and I had prepared. This contains everything you need to restore full control of your financial operations. Every account number, every authorization code, every contract detail, every supplier relationship, complete operational independence. Edmund's eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. "This is comprehensive. It's everything. With this information, you can establish new banking relationships, renegotiate supplier contracts, and transfer all operational control to whoever you choose." I looked directly at Kellor. "Even someone whose primary qualification is looking good in family photos." Helena stood up from the sofa. "What do you want in return?" "I want you to understand what you threw away," I said quietly. "This document represents 5 years of work, 5 years of building relationships, negotiating contracts, establishing credit arrangements, and creating the financial infrastructure that allows your family to live the way you do." I closed the portfolio and picked it up. "I'm going to walk out of here in exactly 60 seconds. If you want this information, Helena needs to say 3 words to me before I reach the door." "What 3 words?" Edmund asked. "She knows." I turned and walked toward the door, counting silently. Behind me, I heard whispered conversations, someone crying, and the sound of chairs scraping against hardwood floors. 30 seconds. "Jace, wait!" Helena's voice, shaky and desperate. 45 seconds. "Please don't go." I reached the door and put my hand on the handle. 55 seconds. I need you. I stopped, my hand still on the door handle, and turned around. Helena stood in the middle of the room, tears streaming down her face, finally understanding what she'd lost. Too late, I said, and walked out. In my car, I placed the portfolio on the passenger seat and started the engine. My phone immediately began ringing. Helena, then Edmund, then their lawyer. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I called Maya. Send the Morrison Industries contract to my personal email. I have a meeting with them this afternoon. What about the Trenwall information? I looked back at the mansion, where I could see figures moving frantically behind the windows. File it under reference materials. I might need it for my new consulting business. As I drove away, I realized I was smiling for the first time in days. It turned out that being brutal and masculine wasn't about flexing in mirrors or looking good in family photos. It was about understanding the difference between being needed and being valued, and having the courage to walk away when you finally learned which one you really were. The Trenwall empire would survive. Eventually, they had enough old family connections and residual wealth to rebuild what I'd dismantled, but they would never again make the mistake of treating their most important relationships as replaceable, and I would never again make the mistake of staying somewhere I wasn't truly wanted. 3 days. That's all it took to show them the difference between being invisible and being gone.